Good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle Holman. I'm a talent manager at Schmidt Futures, and along with my colleague Christina, we are the APM recruitment team. We're joined by two of our fantastic associate product managers, Joyce and Anjali, and we might have one other joining us shortly as well. So we're going to give about one more minute or so just to make sure everyone who's interested in the panel can join, and then we'll get started. But thank you all so much for coming. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And we will be taking questions at the end. In the Q&A section, you can feel free to drop questions if you have them along the way, but then also just know that, we'll definitely devote time towards the end to make sure we can answer any questions that y'all might have. Well, you know what? We are just about 5 minutes in, so I'm going to kick start and let's get started. So Christina, did you actually want to, I don't know if you wanted to do any introduction before we start? Or?
Yeah. So to start, again, hi, everyone. I am Christina, and I am the recruiting coordinator here at Schmidt Futures, and I'm working with Danielle, and we this year are kicking off our APM recruiting for our 2022 cohort class, and we are excited to just talk to you all today, give you an overview of the program, and also answer any questions that you might have. We are, as Danielle said, going to answer your questions towards the end because we are more than likely going to be answering your questions as we talk to our panelists today. So just if you want to hold your questions until the end or just type them in, we'll go through them, and then whatever we haven't addressed, we'll hit at the end also. So yeah, if you, Danielle, if you want to introduce, well, maybe say a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing here.
Sure. So like I said, talent manager, and I can also introduce the program. So I work with Christina, not just with APM recruitment, but also general recruitment for Schmidt Futures. And I think what's really special about our APM program is the way in which we are bringing in a cohort to join a fantastic community. Our APMs are technologists, but really our whole community of Schmidt Futures are really thinking about how do we bring together great people with fantastic ideas, expertise to solve really pressing issues of today. So our APM program specifically is a 2-year program that brings together early career talented technologists like many of you here in the webinar today to think about how can you apply the skills, the expertise that you have, and then also the skills that you hope to grow towards social impact issues. So we're joined, as I shared, by 2 of our fantastic APMs who will talk a little bit more about their experience, but I do want to provide kind of the base level explanation of what the program is. So that in the 2 years, you'll rotate between different types of projects. Many of them will be external partnership projects, so with nonprofit organizations that are partners of Schmidt Futures, but you also may be staffed on internal projects, so work that Schmidt Futures is doing to create positive change around the world, and also just helping with our internal processes as well. Our APMs are fully staffed employees, and so sometimes that's a confusion as well, but y'all will be a full employee at Schmidt Futures, and by the end, we'll graduate from the program with certainly more years of experience, but then also with a network, hopefully, in order to really dive into your next opportunity. So whether you are interested in continuing to pursue a career in product management, whether you're interested in starting your own venture, whether you're interested in getting involved in social impact work through the government space, there's a lot of different pathways that our APMs pursue after leaving the program. But I think that while they're within the program, really opportunities to develop diverse skill sets that'll strengthen them as leaders, as well as change makers. So with that, I'll have our two APMs who are here with us introduce themselves. And can you share a little bit about, certainly who you are and how you came to Schmidt Futures and, and found out about this program?
Anjali, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah, I'll break the ice. Hi, everyone. My name is Anjali Fernandez. I am a Senior Associate Product Manager at Schmidt Futures. I have been here for the better part of 2 years now. I started in 2019 and was our first APM hire. And prior to that, I studied computer science as well as political and cognitive science in college. I actually came to Schmidt Futures with some post-undergrad work experience. I see that's a question in the chat. So I was not straight out of college. I had done some other things and I was working abroad and was coming back to the States and was thinking, through this career transition, what is the thing that I'm looking for most in my next job? And the thing that stuck out to me was I want to be able to use this computer science degree and these technical skills that I've built up in a way that is helping people and in a way that is not, just building software for the sake of building software. I wanted to be able to see a tangible impact on what I was doing and how I was helping people in a very concrete way. And I wanted to do that with people that had a similar mindset and that were excited and that I would love coming to work with every day. And that's the big reason why I came to Schmidt Futures, is because of the potential for impact and the incredible people who are on this team who I would have the opportunity to learn from. And happy to share more examples and stories about all of that later throughout the hour. But that's the short answer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joyce. I'm a junior APM, which means I joined a year after Anjali. So I'm here almost a year now. So before Schmidt Futures, I was at Carnegie Mellon, where I studied computer science and theater. And I actually found the Schmidt Futures APM program on a job posting sites that CMU had. So it was super random. I saw it. And Schmidt Futures seemed like a very interesting organization. I wouldn't say I understood what it was about. The first time I saw the website, it was a little confusing. But as I talked to the people, I realized, this is a really unique organization. It's a philanthropy, but it's a place where young people get to use their technical skills, beyond building software, building commercial softwares to essentially make money. There is so much more potential for young people here to make impact. And so that was just very appealing to me and seemed like a great opportunity to meet people. And, adding on to everything that Anjali spoke of, I think this is a really great opportunity for me to explore. I wouldn't say, right after college, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. So I was actually very open to a more general experience. And I think the rotational model just really, really worked. So yeah, happy to share more later in this session.
Thank you for your introductions. Okay, so we're going to jump right into some of our questions for you to answer. And our first question is, can you tell us about a current or a past project that you've been working on? And what has been one of the most exciting projects that you've worked on, or in the vice versa, something that's been a little bit more challenging?
I can start with this one. So I've actually only been on one external rotation so far, and it's been really cool. So I think I want to talk about that one. So I worked at this fintech company called Remitly. So they are their main service is to help immigrants transfer money abroad to their family. So they have an app that allows, basically anybody in the US, in Canada, a few other countries to transfer money to other places. So it was a really interesting experience because I was basically working in a startup within a startup. So it was like a 7-person team working on a new initiative within this company that is actually about 8 to 9 years old. So there was a lot of ambiguity. There was a lot of opportunity to try a little bit of everything. So I worked really closely with the customer support team. I worked closely with the legal and compliance team, and definitely the engineers. So it was just like a really great growth experience for a first-time PM. And also, I would say, you know, as a foreign national myself, the problem they're trying to solve was pretty close to my heart. And, you know, the company, I could really sense that, you know, people at Remitly care about their users who are the immigrants. They actually have this program where every employee gets to travel to Philippines and meet some of their users and meet the customer support team on the ground. But because of COVID, I don't think anybody did that. But I think that's just like exemplary of the company culture. So it was a really cool place to work at for almost 5 months. Yeah, learned a ton. So.
Yeah, building on that, I can share a couple examples. One, Christina, you asked challenging and exciting. I'll give you a little bit of both. A rotation that I really loved was recently I had the opportunity to serve as the product manager at a startup, which was very early stage, very small, but they were building a software platform to help progressive organizations and better effectively target and mobilize people to get out the vote in advance of the 2020 election. And this is an organization that I did not know existed. It's not something I ever would have found had it not been for Schmidt Futures. There's no way I would have been able to like go like find and apply for this job elsewhere. But because of where I was and because of our network, I was able to embed with this organization as their basically their first full-time staff level product manager and help build their software platform, launch it to 41 states in the lead up to the 2020 election. And it was something that felt very important and very timely and urgent. And I was really grateful to have the opportunity to work on something that felt so relevant in the current moment. So that's an example of a project that I really loved. Another example of a project that I loved but was incredibly challenging and incredibly different from that is a rotation where I was essentially working with an academic professor on helping them start a company where I was kind of employee zero to an extent. So I wore not just the product manager hat, but also kind of chief of staff, business development, user research, all of those things, and really had that 0 to 1 experience of figuring out what to build and how, and even prototyping the actual machine learning platform and software itself. So going from that all the way through like recruiting a CTO and a full-time team. So that was a very, very different experience that taught me an entirely different set of skills. So I think over the course of these different rotations, I've had the chance to really not only work at organizations where I can, you know, really wear the product management hat and learn from people who have done it before and work with engineers, but also build things from scratch as well.
What you said was actually pretty fascinating because I would not have expected to go into a role and now I'm like chief of staff and I'm doing all of these extra things, which is funny because you kind of hit the next question that I actually have for you both in terms of like, what is something that you didn't expect before coming in as an APM or working as an APM, you know, like what kind of skills did you learn or not think that you would learn, like learning to be a chief of staff, you know, or doing or starting a business and being employee zero. So what are some things that you learned and didn't expect to learn as you've been in this role?
It's hard to start because honestly, there are so many. I can start with a couple. I think, so Schmidt Futures is really unique because, you know, it is a philanthropy and it has a really vast network and it's just a really fascinating place to work at, I think right out of college for me. And I think it was, so outside of the external projects, I got to work on this internal project with our entrepreneurship team. So we have a entrepreneur in residence program at Schmidt Futures, and in the future, we're actually going to improve the program and turn it into kind of a competition format. And it was also a 0 to 1 process, and I was able to work super closely with the team and learn a ton about investment and how to, supporting founders in the social sector. So that was something that I did not expect at all, but the opportunity, presented itself to me, and I was really curious. So I was able to just join that team and learn a ton. And I would also say that there's a lot of people with policy background at Schmidt Futures. And, before coming here, I had zero knowledge about how, policy can work as a lever to affect large scale social change. So it's been really cool learning that part about the world as well. Hi, Annalise. Oh.
Hi, sorry, I was having technical difficulties, but I'm glad I was able to make it.
We're happy to have you join. And just to catch you up really quickly, we're just going through asking the questions. And I don't know if you want to answer this, kind of throw you in immediately. But what is something that you didn't expect before working as an APM? And so for example, what is a skill that you used or developed the most that you didn't think that you'd be using since you've been in the role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, there's a couple. One was just dealing with the amount of ambiguity, and maybe the other folks here have touched on that a little bit. I didn't think it would be as important to be able to jump into something and recognize that I don't know anything, but also recognize that what I do know is maybe more than certain of as an APM, you're sort of placed in the position where you are expected to be sort of as close to the ground or as much of an expert as you can be. And then the folks above you, your manager, just may not have the answers and probably won't by definition because you are the closest to the problem. So however much information you have, it's what there is to have, and you just have to make some kind of decision. That was a big thing that I'm still having to practice to this day.
Yeah, I think building on that, that's such a good point, Annalise. I think coming from school, the mindset you get is that there are assignments that you're responsible for and you know what winning looks like. And I think the biggest thing that you can learn through a program like this is how to not only execute and do the things really well, but also in many cases define what winning looks like for not just yourself, but also for the people you work with and the people who you report up to, who are all looking to you to figure out, well, okay, there's this big problem. There is no way to Google how to solve poverty or whatever it might be. So actually being responsible for figuring out what winning looks like, that's been really challenging and a really great skill to build up. And the other thing, building on Joyce's answer, I think Schmidt Futures has a really interesting combination of people from different backgrounds. So not just technology, we all came in with some experience with that, but especially in policy and government and consulting and the military and entrepreneurship, it's a really interesting mix of people who all bring their own toolkits on how to solve problems and kind of combine that in one place. So I think learning about all of those different ways and approaches to solving problems and then figuring out how to apply them in your particular context has been really fascinating. And a small example of that I'll give is I had the opportunity to work on an internal initiative that focused on policymaking in figuring out how to help increase access to the internet and bridge the digital divide for people in an entire state. And there are obvious technical components to that, but a lot of that is also understanding, how the policymaking process works and how you interface with government agencies and local officials and really using all the available levers to create change. So I think that's a skill that you may not necessarily expect to develop coming in, but is one that you definitely have the opportunity to build up as well.
It's very well said. The last thing I might add to that is something that my APM rotation manager, where I'm currently rotating at, which is Recidiviz, a criminal justice reform nonprofit startup. My manager there recently told me something like, as a PM, you're expected to, you have engineers, you have designers, you have data folks who are on your team, and they're kind of looking to you to provide some of that guidance. And at least they sort of trust that you're an analytical person. They know that you're smart and you come in with this way of looking at things. So it's your job to like take all the ambiguity and kind of like translate it into like some kind of goal or way forward, even if it might be wrong. And then that's your role as the PM. And then you like give other folks the space and remove the ambiguity for them so they can run as fast as they can towards the goal. And I also realized I didn't introduce myself, so I'll do that really quickly. My name's Annalise. I'm currently an APM. I'm not, oh, well, I guess shortly I'll become a senior APM, I suppose. But I came in 2020, so I'm in that class. And so I've been here about a year, and I studied computer science in college for my bachelor's.
Nice. You guys have actually touched upon the question that I want to ask next in terms of like, what do you think it takes to be successful as an APM? I know you've said having that mindset of being able to like jump in and just figure it out, because some things are going to be ambiguous and you're not going to always have the answers, but you just have to be one of those action oriented type of people. So what else would you say you think it would really take to be successful in this program?
I'll take a stab at this. There are a couple things that I think are, I mean, obviously take all the things that you expect like a product manager to be able to do. I think there's like a set of core skills. Perhaps I think the most important one, in my opinion, is not necessarily like being able to code or like being able to create software yourself. There have been fairly few situations where I've been required to do that. I think the two most important ones in my experience have been being able to make sense of data, both qualitative and quantitative, and turn that into recommendations for action. And two, being a very, very good listener and synthesizer. So I think there are areas where especially because you're rotating into organizations that are taking you in for a short period of time, have perhaps not that many people on staff, and have a really high burden of urgency for the problems that they're solving. Being able to come in with humility and empathy for what people are doing and the problems that they're trying to solve, being able to ramp up really quickly on the problem space and understanding what everyone is trying to accomplish, and then really in a like open-minded way, take all of the information that you're given and also that you have collected on your own and like synthesize that into something that is productive. I think there are often cases like where I worked at an organization that had never had a product manager before. So there was no like paradigm for this is what we expect PMs to be able to do. And when I came in, I had to do a little bit of work to not only define my role, but define the importance of it. And so building those relationships and helping people understand where I can be valuable, I think that was really important. So I think to sum up, humility and empathy, listening and synthesis, and then just being able to take all of those things and build relationships and drive towards action really quickly.
That's a great answer. Just to add on to that, I think even from just a year of being in this program, I think I've just been really lucky to get the chance to meet and be mentored by so many great PMs. And I think one thing I've noticed is there's no one way to be a good PM. So if you think of a product manager, you might think of someone who's like the most confident and talks the most in the meeting and is like very charismatic in the life of any party. That's not what all PMs are. I've worked with many PMs who have sort of different superpowers. Like some are the quietest in the meeting. And if you didn't know who the roles were when you came in, you might not realize that they're the PM, but they've sort of they're more introspective maybe, and they've done the work beforehand to like talk to all the stakeholders, all the team members, get everybody aligned. So when the meeting comes up, they hardly have to say anything because everyone is already aligned. That could be the type of PM that you are. And there's so many other ways to be a PM. But I think the one thing that would make you successful in this program, because it is just 2 years and a lot is happening, is being very open and being able to learn quickly, which may sound like a cliche, excuse me. But I think over the past 6 months, I've learned so much. I think a big part of that is being able to take feedback and kind of just roll with it and keep moving.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Anjali and Annalise just said. And to be honest, still trying to figure it out. Just, get better at what they said. And I would also add that like prioritization has been really, really important, not just like prioritization for, building product, but also like, how do you prioritize your time during these 2 years? Because there's so many exciting projects, both internally, externally. There are just a lot of opportunities and cool people to work with. So yeah, I think one part of making the most out of this experience is to know how to prioritize your effort, how to, manage your energy between internal and external projects, kind of building a cadence that works for you. I think that requires a lot of self-reflection and soul searching and, working with trade-offs. So yeah, just want to add that.
Truly appreciate all of your insights on that. So then my last question for you all, before we head to the application portion with Danielle and I, wanted to just ask you guys, like, how would you describe the overall culture at Schmidt Futures? And you can talk about the culture of the APM program as well. Like, I know one thing that I've heard is just you guys are like a really tight knit like community and family within the organization. But I would like to hear both the culture within APM, the cohort, as well as your bigger overview about Schmidt Futures.
I will start by saying that my cohort experience has absolutely entirely defined my experience at Schmidt Futures and is possibly the most important and valuable set of relationships that I've had the opportunity to build through these past 2 years. Like, these are the best people that I ever could have like hoped to be in a program with. And by virtue of being put into like these ambiguous high pressure situations, you're often going through a lot of the same challenges together, and having that community to rely on has been really, really important. And those are relationships that I know that I will be keeping. These are going to be my friends for a very, very long time. So I think that has been a really, really valuable part of my experience as an APM, is just those cohort bonds. I can't overstate that.
Yeah, I would totally agree with what Anjali said. And also, I think something that I really enjoy about the Schmidt Futures culture, and something that honestly surprised me, is just how open everybody is to sharing their experience, to talking to you, give you advice. Yeah, because there are a lot of really, really experienced people here, people with crazy backstories. And, whenever you shoot them an email or message, they're just really down to chat and help you out. And I have colleagues who have, give me advice on my rotations, help me build connections for my personal projects. It's just been a really, really friendly and open network. So yeah, I think that's one of my favorite part of the culture.
I agree with both Anjali and Joyce. I'll just add, as far as the APM specific culture, I think a big part of it, something that I really noticed I didn't expect, was how often we sort of get this, I'm trying to think of how to say it. Like we often hear the words, "you are the product." When we're asking a question like, oh, how should we prioritize, to Joyce's point? Like, should I focus on this or that? The answer from our managers or from the program directors is usually, okay, what is going to help you the most? We're here for you. So ultimately, any products that you produce or teams that you blow everybody away and create this amazing thing, that's awesome. That's sort of the cherry on top, because the real point of this 2 years is to develop you as a person and to develop this cohort as like tight friends who will go on to change the world together. Cliche, but like very powerful group of people who will go on to do awesome things. So that kind of like very like hyper supportive mentality has been what I've noticed. And another piece of that is sort of the excitement of being one of the first. So Anjali, part of the first class, Joyce and I part of the second class. This fall, the third class is joining, and then y'all would be part of the fourth. So yeah, I don't know, it's just quite exciting to be able to shape the program like that. And you're going to get a lot of answers like, oh, what do you want to do? Literally whatever that if you can think of it and you put in the work to build it, we'll try to find a way to make it happen.
I love that you have all touched on how I felt as well, from like a general, like from the non-APM side and just like the recruiting talent / like just general member of Schmidt Future side. I have genuinely felt that everyone here has been extremely supportive. I don't think I mentioned this. I'm like fairly new. I'm like 4 months into the organization, 4 or 5 months now. I started with Danielle. We started on the same time. So our experience, and I'm pretty sure Danielle, I mean, I can't speak for you. You say like we share the similar experience in which like when you first come, everyone kind of, hey, how are you? Like reaches out to you. Let's have a coffee. Let's like have a chat or a video chat and just get to know each other. So it's a very welcoming environment. And as you can see from you three, Joyce, Anjali, and Elise, like when you all volunteered to come and use your time to talk to people about your experiences, it genuinely shows what Joyce says on like everyone is really open to sharing their experiences and talking to you about like their journey and process while they're here at Schmidt Futures. So it is definitely a testament to how great the organization is and how warm everyone genuinely is and like not only trying to make social impact and make changes, but trying to like be there for their internal community within the company as well. So yeah. Danielle, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything or
Oh, I think you all have hit it. It's a pretty special place to work. It's not perfect, but I think to Annalise's point, so not only is this fourth cohort that we're recruiting for the fourth cohort of APMs, but it's also, Schmidt Futures itself is only 4 years old. So with that, there are growing pains, but I think there's also a really great opportunity to be a part of an organization that's still new, still developing, and has a really, really good bones, but also really, a lot of space to continue to grow.
Yes. Well, I do want to shift the conversation a little bit to the application and the recruitment process, because I know a lot of people joined this conversation to hear that also, and what the application looks like. So Danielle, if you would like to just kind of talk us through what the recruitment process is going to look like over the next couple of months.
Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. So the application has 3 primary components. So the first is the written application. And in that, we are looking at your resume, and then we have 2 essay prompts. That is due officially September 1st. However, we do have an early deadline. So if you apply by August 1st, we'll review your application early, so you can get an earlier read, and then you'll be notified earlier opportunity to submit your work product for the technical assessment, which is the second part. And then you'll get an earlier notification about whether you advance to the finalist stage. The very first question that comes up all the time is like, is there any advantage to applying early? And so no. So in terms of a competitive advantage in the process, there's not. So we will still evaluate all of our applicants, all of our finalists at the same time. So even if you apply in August and you're notified that you're moving to the interview round, by September, you would still have to wait until October when we, review all the applications for final interviews. But the incentive, I suppose, for applying early is if you have summer internship opportunities and offers, to have that awareness of whether you're moving forward and advancing in our process. Other folks in past iterations of admission cycles, people have said that would be helpful to them. So if that is your situation where you might have some competing offers at the end of the summer and you really want to, you're really excited about this potential opportunity and having that awareness would be helpful to you, then that could be a great opportunity for you to apply. If you'd like to spend a little bit more time, and apply at the September 1st deadline, do that as well, or you could do that instead. No competitive advantage, but there is kind of that awareness of where you would of when you are notified of moving on to the finalist stage. So in terms of the 3 components, so that written application is the first piece, then there's a technical assessment, and then the interview process. So for the technical assessment, we're really looking at your data analysis skills, data visualization skills, and I'll have the other APMs chime in as well. So it's not a standard coding assessment where you're going to have to code on demand or on the spot, but rather we're really looking at your ability to understand technical ideas and being able to talk through issues and problems. And then from there in the interview process, it's a combination of that as well. So how are you able to kind of communicate technical issues? How would you problem solve? We're looking for critical thinkers. And so how are you able to navigate through challenges that you might encounter in a simulated project? And then also generally, are you excited about being a part of a cohort? So that is something that is distinctive about applying to an opportunity like this. So it's not a one-off job or one-off role for within the organization, but you are really joining a cohort that is a program. Joyce, Annalise, and Anjali have talked a lot about really benefiting from the community that we're a part of at Schmidt Futures, but specifically within the APM program. So we're looking for people who are excited about that type of opportunity. And then also people who are really committed to our social impact work. I think that's something that makes us distinctive. So there are tons of APM programs that are out there and they're fantastic, but not all of them have that social impact lens. And so we are looking for folks who are excited about using kind of technical expertise and skills for good and for elevating issues of importance and really kind of trying to make an impact in those spaces. So in terms of the timeline, I want to reiterate because it can be a little confusing. So like I said, August 1st is that early deadline. The official deadline is September 1st for the written application. And then final decisions will be distributed probably mid to end October. So I know it's a long timeline, especially when we're in July right now. We are aware, but we also hope that you'll bear with us and invest in the application process if you're interested. And then when you receive an offer, or if you receive an offer in October, you won't start until next year, so August or September of 2022. So that is also really important. We are accepting folks who are graduating seniors or folks who have up to about 3 or 4 years of work experience. But for the folks who have work experience, so if you're not graduating from university in 2022, you just need to be aware that if accepted into the program in October of 2021, you wouldn't start until the following year. So that's just something to be mindful of. But I hope that is helpful in understanding how our timeline and our process works. Christina, would you like to chat or share anything about kind of application tips or how people can stand out?
Yeah. So really quickly, I did want to add to what you're saying in terms of like the final round as well. There's 3 different interviews that you will go through. And one of them in the beginning will just be with like our Schmidt Futures team members. And then the second round will be with the APM leadership team. And then the final round will be with our CEO, Eric Braverman. So I know that could be potentially nerve-wracking, but every single one of us here has had to interview with him, and he continues to interview every single person that comes into the company, which I think is one. I'm gonna admit I was a little nervous when I had to do that, but towards the end, I think it really goes to show that one, it's a tight community in terms of, or like a company, and where you get to have FaceTime with the CEO of the company. And there's not a lot of people or organizations that I feel like has that opportunity, especially since they're sometimes so high up and there's so many touch points in between getting to them. In terms of application tips and how to stand out on the application, I would say for the written application or the first round where you have to answer essays, like we really want to get to know a good sense of who you are and understand kind of like why you are what you were passionate about and why you were passionate about this topic, and also just kind of understanding like what you've overcame or persevered through. So that's really just us, as I said, getting to know who you are. So just do your best to really show us and highlight what makes you stand out. In terms of the technical assessment, I don't know, I guess maybe the APMs, you can kind of touch point on that, mostly because I kind of like, I know there's like a one portion where you're going to be coding. So I'm like, I don't really know how to stand out besides like getting that answer right. But in terms of like really also use that opportunity to like show your analytical skills as well. So I don't know if anyone wants to touch base on that really quickly before I like move into like the interview portion and how to like really stand out on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be helpful, Joyce and Anjali, if you can share a little bit about what we mean by technical. And it's a question that we talk about all the time. You know, technical could have a lot of different meanings. So what are the ways in which you think you've used technical skills in your roles, and you know, what are the types of things we're testing on in that technical assessment?
Yeah, I'll take a stab, and Joyce, please jump in. So let me start with what it's not. I think the thing that we aren't expecting anyone to do, and that I have rarely done on the job, is, you know, sit down, open up my like editing, whatever, and start like writing code. That is frankly very rare. We're not expecting you to do like a hacker rank challenge or elite code, whatever assessment. This isn't like a software engineering interview. So let's like get that out of the way. I think the skills that we mean when we say technical really revolve around a couple things. One is like when you are building software, when you're building a product, like what like the kinds of decisions you would be making around what should be built. Like what is your sense around how to build things, even if you aren't the one building them? So maybe that's like those could be design decisions. Those could be front end decisions about what things look like. Those could be system architecture questions. So just understanding how to build things, and when something is, for lack of a better term, BS, being able to call that out and understand like the level of technical depth that is effective in making good decisions for your engineers when you're not the one actually building the things. And the second piece, I think, which we've touched on before, definitely is being able to understand and interpret data. So understanding what data is necessary to make a decision, understanding where the gaps are and where the biases come in the data that you do have and how it's collected, and being able to synthesize and analyze information, whether that's like pulling tables from SQL or collecting information from surveys or whatever it may be, in order to inform how you design and build a product and make those kinds of decisions in like the product development process. So yeah, just going to, again, reiterate, we're not going to send you a LeetCode challenge.
Yeah, and to add on to what Anjali just said, like the technical assignment this year will likely test a wide range of skills. And I really want to emphasize here that like you're not expected to like know everything. I think the point is really just, you know, if you want to show off your skills, like that's great. But if you don't have the skill, just explain how you would approach the problem. I think, you know, as a PM, like a lot of the times, just like fill in the hole that's not been filled yet on the team. And there's a lot of like trying to figure things out on the spot. And I think that experience will be, you know, simulated a little bit in this technical assignment as well. So don't panic if it's asking for something that you haven't tried before, like that's totally okay. But yeah, have fun.
A question that I see in the chat and that comes up often is how to prepare for the interviews. And so one of the best pieces of advice that I can offer, and not just for Schmidt Futures interviews or for an APM interview, but just in general, is practice. So whether it's with a trusted friend, family member, mentor, but talking through difficult projects that you worked on, difficult projects or the best project that you've worked on, the thing that you're most proud of, practicing how you talk about it will be very helpful to you because, you know, all of us can get a little nervous sometimes if we're in a higher pressure situation, such as an interview. So really thinking about how do you explain not just what happened, but what was your approach to that process? What would you do differently if you had more time? What were the pain points in the project that you worked on and how do you resolve them? So those are the types of things that we want to understand. How do you approach a problem? So not just what's the solution or what, you know, what was the final result, but what was the approach? How did you work with others to get to the right path? Or how did you fail? And what did you learn from that failing? We're not just about solutions. Certainly our overall work is to provide a positive impact. But we also understand that along the way, there are mistakes that are going to be made. There are like flat out failures that are going to happen. And so a part of success, a part of making a positive impact is really being able to iterate on losses, iterate on challenges, work with other people, bring in different stakeholders when you're realizing we don't actually have enough information. So all of those things I think are important questions to think about as you're navigating any interview process, but certainly for us in a space where critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration are pillars to the work that we do. Practicing how you talk about those things is really a great way to set you up for success. Christina or anyone else, do you have any other tips you might offer in terms of how to prepare for a behavioral interview in this process?
Just to clarify, are we discussing the behavioral interview or an actual PM style interview?
Either.
Sorry. Oh, okay, got it. I think as far as preparing for a PM style interview, at least what I did was I pretty much like went hard in the same ways that I would prepare for a technical interview, but I got like cracking the PM interview rather than cracking the coding interview. And I basically grabbed a friend and did as many mock interviews as possible. So to Danielle's point of practice. So we would go back and forth and I would be the interviewer and be able to see in my head, like be able to judge sort of how this person is answering, how I might do it differently, and then give them feedback. I think how you arrive at the answer is way more important than the actual answer. So being structured in your thinking, communicating really clearly, and just at the end of the day, in an interview especially, you're never going to have all the information, and it's sort of on purpose. The interviewer is probably withholding things from you, and then we'll reveal them later as sort of follow-up questions. So if you just make a decision, kind of stick to it, and then when you get new information, be able to, just be light on your feet and still like show that you're a reasonable and analytic person who can make decisions under that kind of time pressure with ambiguity.
Yeah. Appreciate these tips and insights. I do want to, since we have only about 10 minutes left, try to jump in and answer as much of these questions as possible. I did also drop inside the chat our link with some of our FAQs that we have. And it tells you a little bit more about the program, gives you, as I said, the FAQs and the email for us. So if we don't get to answer your question while we're here, you can go ahead and email us and we'll be able to answer them that way also. So to just kind of go down, let's see. In terms of how are applicants evaluated, are you looking for growth, like work experience or extracurricular activities? I would definitely say yes, we would like for you to highlight that if you have any like extracurricular activities, anything you co-founded, founded, joined, was a part of, any internship experience, coding languages that you know, we definitely want you to highlight that in your resume. And don't worry, I know there's like that stigma of like, I need to get everything in one page. Like it's okay if it goes to 2 pages. So you can definitely highlight yourself in that way. And let's see, we have another question on for our reference, should we choose one or multiple? Should it be someone from our current organization or can we choose someone from a past org? The reference is going to be up to you, but it definitely has to be someone that can speak to your skill sets and someone that can speak to like the work that you've done. So I wouldn't recommend, you know, someone that is a friend or like your mom. You know, definitely someone that could be like a former professor, a former colleague, coworker, someone you interned with, and that would be extremely helpful for them to highlight what you've done. And then in terms of how many you can use, I would say do about 2 to 3 if you can for your references.
Can I jump in, Christina?
Yeah.
So there's a question about, does military service count against the 4 years work experience limit? So the short answer is no, but the longer answer is we don't have a hard and fast, you can only have 4 years of experience or less. Why we say about 3 to 4 years of experience though is because if you have more than 4 years or so, you'll likely be a fit for one of our other roles. So this is meant to be an early career program. So really folks that are really early in trying to figure out what they want to do have, some background experience, but it's not necessarily the same fit for someone who has 5+ years of experience. So all that to say, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's more about based on the experiences that you've had. If you have 5 years of experience in product management, it sounds like you might be a better fit for, a formal associate role that we might have at Schmidt Futures. We have product manager roles, not currently right now, but we do in the future, or some of our other roles. So don't get discouraged if you have more years of experience than we talk about in the program. It doesn't mean you're not a fit for Schmidt Futures. It might just mean actually there might be a different place that we can deploy the talents that you have. So we do have many roles, and we will continue to be hiring forever, I think, but certainly for the next year and a half, we'll be hiring a lot. So keep us, keep our tab kind of refreshed. If the APM program doesn't seem like a fit for whatever reason, see if there are other opportunities for you to get involved in the work that we do.
Yeah. Another question I see here is, how much agency do you have in choosing what projects to be rotated into? And I think from the last panel, I can answer this. Correct me if I'm wrong. The first rotation is kind of chosen for you, and then the second one you choose, or any after, you guys choose what you want to do. Am I like correct on this?
To a certain extent. I think the second and onward, you get more input, but that's not to say you could necessarily. So for the second, I'll speak to my experience. I'm not sure how it's going to be for the incoming class. For me, I was asked for my second rotation, what are like the major characteristics that you're interested in? So I said working with this type of population, vulnerable population, working with people, organization with strong product experience, and maybe a startup environment. And I got like 2 or 3 out of those. But if you were wanting, like, I only want to work on life extension technology, and I want to help people live to like 600 years old, you may not get placed in that exact one. If that helps to clarify things.
Okay. Thank you. And then I know this question I also put to you, Annalise. We have one here that says, like, will each of these 3 interviews be behavioral, or are there technical coding interviews that during that time? I know you had another tip or advice to also add in terms for interview skills. So wanted to know if you can throw that in there as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think a question that I had when I was applying, so there is some difference between, or I at least saw some difference between like behavioral interviews where it's sort of the same across any role, you're sort of getting to know the person, and a technical sort of PM interviews. You wouldn't be coding, but you'd be asked product questions. Like if you were the PM for X product, how would you expand it to like 10X the users or something? That type of question that you'll find tons of examples online, and there's a specific way of preparing for that type of question. If that's what you mean, I believe there will be some kind of mix. Correct me if I'm wrong this year, Danielle and Christina. Does that sound about right? There's a mix of those?
Sorry, one more time, please.
Oh, is there a mix of product-specific interview questions, like product questions from maybe cracking the product interview?
Yeah. So yes. So there will be a mix of kind of standard product questions, and also more general questions about team, the way you work on a team, the way you approach different challenges and problems, like more generally. So not just a product challenge, but like what's your approach to problem solving, like for in your own personal life and things like that.
Yeah. And the other tip that I would give is just about preparing for those technical product questions. I think it is a little bit different here than if you're applying to, say, any of the other APM programs of those big tech companies. I would try to think a little more critically about some of the assumptions. Is profit always the number one assumption? Is getting where users always the number one assumption? And maybe question those and try to think a bit differently in maybe like a social goods space, of which there are many flavors. And also maybe pay special attention to other areas of the world besides the US. So if it might be useful to like know a little bit about the fact that not the whole world has smartphones, and like majority of the world has feature phones, and what those are and how products might play into that, especially when you're talking about social good and developing markets. That was just from my interview experience. Not sure if this year will be the same.
Okay. And then I'm going to try to get to these last 4 if we can in the next couple of minutes. What made you choose, and maybe only one of you can answer this just for time constraint. What made you choose Schmidt Future's APM program over other APM programs?
I'll give a quick reason, and it is something we've touched on before, just the level of contact and agency in understanding how different problem spaces work. So not just focused on one company that builds one thing. Additionally, working with people in a smaller team environment. The Schmidt Futures, when I joined, was like 20 people. It has grown much more since then, but it is still rapidly growing and it is still very young. And that was an environment that I was really excited about. And so the team and community aspect was really important to me. And I think finally, the opportunity to experience what life and culture and working style was like at a bunch of different external organizations, I think is really valuable because you can compare and contrast and figure out what works for you. And it's a really interesting learning and personal development opportunity that you may not necessarily get at one company where the culture is kind of standardized to a certain degree.
Thank you, thank you. Another question that we see here is, does Schmidt Futures primarily work with US policymakers on domestic issues? Are there also opportunities to work with policymakers abroad or across borders? Anyone want to quickly take that if they're aware? Yeah.
I'll take part of that question. So I would say the majority of the issues that we focus on are domestic issues, largely because we are a domestic organization, we are a US-based organization, but we, and especially, I guess, the government work that we do is focused on US policy. However, we do have continually expansive international issues that we're working on. I would say not always working with like government agencies, but working with NGOs, nonprofits internationally is a focus of ours as well.
Then last 2 questions. What opportunities for being in physically the same office or space as your cohort when everyone gets placed in different projects? What are opportunities for being in physically the same space?
So in a pre-COVID world, we were all based in New York and co-located. Depending on the rotation, we would move, or not move, but periodically fly out on site to an organization on an ad hoc basis as needed. In a COVID world, a lot more is remote, and so it's highly dependent on your host organization, I would say.
And there's a last question about kind of the application process. So I just want to confirm. So just to make sure everyone understands it. So the 3 components. So the first round, written application, second round, technical assessment, third round is the interview round. So in terms of how a person would progress, so only a select number of folks are advanced to each stage. So everyone when you apply with the written application, everyone completes the essay questions and submits their resume. From there, we narrow it down to a select number of folks who would advance to the technical assessment. From there to the interviews, and narrow it down as we continue to narrow the cohort to about 8 to 12 people. So I want to make sure people understand how that process works. So unfortunately, we don't have capacity to have every single person who applies complete complete technical assessment and an interview. But we do hope that because we have provide different opportunities for you to share skills and interests, we can get to know you, different elements of who you are and what you have to offer.
Great. Well, that's it for all the questions that we have here. And I just want to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to talk to us and really share your experience and providing these tips and guidance. As I said before, and I'll drop it in the chat again, I've dropped our link to our website that has some frequently asked questions, has signups for if you want to join any future panels, and also our email if you didn't get an opportunity to ask us a question here, but would like to talk to us and ask any specific questions in a future time. And we are really happy to see all of you join today and that you're interested in joining our program. And we look forward to getting your applications. So enjoy your Thursday, everyone. One more day until the weekend. So have a safe and wonderful rest of your night. Bye.